On a damp November night in 1765, a stone-walled building opened its doors on Dublin's North Strand and declared itself a refuge for fallen women. In reality, it was the first Magdalene Laundry, a place where unmarried mothers, orphans, and any woman deemed morally wayward were locked away to perform endless washing for the church. The founders believed that hard labor could cleanse both cloth and conscience. The concept borrowed from continental Europe, where similar institutions had been used to discipline women who broke social norms. In Ireland, the model was quickly linked to penitential work. Inmates wore plain habits, received no wages, and were forbidden contact with the outside world. Sister Mary Agnes O'Leary would later become the superior of this Dublin house, overseeing a regime that treated laundry as punishment rather than vocation. What no one at the time imagined was how this modest beginning would blossom into a nationwide network that would imprison tens of thousands for more than 2 centuries. The question looms: what social forces allowed such an enterprise to flourish unchecked? By the 1880s, the Irish landscape was dotted with more than 20 Magdalene houses, from Cork to Galway. The Victorian era's obsession with sexual purity turned these laundries into convenient repositories for women whose pregnancies fell outside marriage. State officials began referring unmarried mothers directly to the institutions, believing that confinement would protect public morality and spare families scandal. The laundry work intensified. Inmates were tasked with washing linens not only for local parishes, but also for government offices and charitable hospitals. Their output fed a growing demand for clean cloth in an Ireland still reeling from famine and emigration. Yet the women received no remuneration; their labor was counted as penance. Behind the respectable facade, reports of physical abuse began to surface. Former resident Eileen Flynn later recalled that the beatings were routine, the food scarce, and any protest met with silence. These testimonies would remain hidden for decades, buried beneath a culture that preferred not to see its own contradictions. The open loop here: how would global conflict soon turn these laundries into engines of war production? When the Great War erupted in 1914, the British Army's need for uniforms, blankets, and hospital linens exploded. Irish Magdalene laundries were co-opted to meet this demand, their inmates suddenly thrust into a wartime economy. The work schedule stretched from 12 to 16 hours daily. The clatter of washing machines became a relentless soundtrack to the conflict abroad. The state paid the church for each kilogram of linen produced, effectively turning unpaid female labor into a profitable contract. Sister Mary Agnes O'Leary's Dublin house alone supplied thousands of yards of fabric for soldiers' uniforms. The women, already stripped of agency, now bore the weight of an empire's war machine. Yet the war also sowed seeds of later revelation. Soldiers returning home spoke of the immaculate cleanliness of Irish linens, never suspecting the suffering behind them. After the armistice, a handful of former inmates began to write letters describing the conditions, but their voices were dismissed as exaggerations. The unanswered question lingered: would post-war Ireland continue this exploitation, or would it finally confront the moral cost? The Irish Free State, established in 1922, inherited the Magdalene system and codified its role within the new nation. Legislation such as the 1935 Children Act gave state agencies authority to place illegitimate children and their mothers into institutional care without parental consent. The laundries became de facto extensions of the legal apparatus, with courts routinely ordering women into confinement. Legal frameworks limited escape. Inmates were required to sign contracts of obedience, a document that held no legal standing but was enforced by religious superiors and police alike. Attempts to leave often resulted in criminal charges for vagrancy or breach of peace. The state's involvement provided a veneer of legitimacy, masking the abuse that persisted behind closed doors. During this period, the number of women confined surged. By the early 1950s, more than 20,000 had passed through the system, and the network now encompassed over 30 houses across Ireland. Yet mainstream media rarely reported on the conditions. Stories were either omitted or softened to fit a narrative of moral guardianship. The lingering mystery: Why would a nation built on democratic ideals allow such secrecy to endure? The 1960s marked the apex of confinement. Over 30,000 women and girls had been held in Magdalene Laundries, many for decades of their lives. Their daily routine was relentless: rise before dawn, wash, iron, fold, repeat. The work was unpaid. Any earnings were claimed by the order to cover maintenance. Physical abuse, malnutrition, and denial of medical care were documented later through survivor testimonies, but at the time, they were dismissed as private matters. Children born within the walls faced a grim fate. Mothers were forced to surrender newborns, who were then placed for adoption, often abroad, to families that never knew their origins. The 2014 government report, confirming over 800 unmarked graves at Tuam mother and baby home, revealed the scale of this tragedy, linking it directly to the same institutional mindset that governed the laundries. Despite mounting evidence, public discourse remained muted. Newspapers ran human interest pieces about reforming women rather than exposing systemic abuse. The silence was a deliberate shield. Any inquiry threatened the church's authority and the state's complicity. Yet beneath the quiet, a new generation of survivors began to organize, sowing the seeds for future reckoning. In the late 1990s, former residents like Eileen Flynn stepped out of anonymity and into the public arena. They formed support groups, held press conferences, and demanded acknowledgement. Their testimonies pierced the veil of denial. "We were not prisoners of war. We were prisoners of a moral crusade," Flynn declared in a televised interview that would later be cited by the 2015 Commission of Investigation. The media finally turned its lens inward. Documentaries, newspaper exposés, and parliamentary questions forced the state to confront the hidden history. Justice Mary Lafoy, chairing the Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes, gathered evidence that linked the Magdalene Laundries to broader patterns of institutional abuse, including the removal of children and the neglect of health standards. These revelations opened a crucial loop. How would the government respond when confronted with undeniable proof? The answer would arrive in the form of an official apology and a series of legal redress measures. On 28 November 2013, Taoiseach Enda Kenny delivered a formal state apology for Ireland's role in the operation of Magdalene Laundries. He acknowledged that the state failed to protect some of its most vulnerable citizens and pledged cooperation with ongoing investigations. The apology was accompanied by the establishment of the Commission of Investigation into Mother and Baby Homes, chaired by Justice Mary Lafoy, which released a comprehensive report in 2015. The Commission's findings confirmed systemic abuse, forced labor, physical punishment, denial of medical care, and the illegal removal of children for adoption. It also highlighted the complicity of state agencies that referred women to the laundries under the guise of moral protection. The report cited over 30,000 women confined across more than 30 houses, a staggering figure that underscored the breadth of the tragedy. Compensation schemes were subsequently introduced, offering financial redress to survivors and families of those who perished. While no amount could erase the trauma, these measures represented an institutional acknowledgement that had been absent for centuries. Yet questions remain. Can monetary compensation ever truly heal the intergenerational scars left by such oppression? Today, former Magdalene sites are being transformed into museums, memorials, and community centres dedicated to preserving survivor narratives. The Dublin Laundry, where Sister Mary Agnes O'Leary once presided, now houses an exhibition that juxtaposes original ledger books with oral histories, ensuring that the voices of the confined are heard. The legacy extends beyond bricks and records. Contemporary Irish society grapples with the moral reckoning prompted by these revelations, influencing debates on church-state separation, child welfare policies, and gender equality. Survivor activism continues to shape legislation, demanding stricter oversight of any institution caring for vulnerable populations. Reflecting on more than 2 centuries of confinement, we see a pattern. Societal fear of female sexuality combined with institutional power created a system that silenced, exploited, and erased countless lives. The Magdalene Laundries stand as a stark reminder that when moral judgment replaces compassion, entire generations can be consigned to the shadows. Their stories now emerge into the light, urging us never again to turn a blind eye to injustice.